What's up, gangsters? It's time for episode 5 of the Fundamentals build series with the Tamiya 148th Spitfire Mark 1. And as promised, I'm going to dedicate as much of this episode as necessary to doing Q&A. That's something I haven't tried before, and I feel like it's a pretty good way to try and answer some of these questions, because the truth is I'm just terrible at answering questions directly on the YouTube page. I don't really use YouTube as social media. It's for me just a place to post my videos, and honestly maybe I should just turn the comments off, but that's not cool either. So anyway, let's try this and see what happens. So what I'm going to do, I've got my iPad open here at episode 1, and I'm going to just start scrolling through and hitting these questions. Somebody's asking me if I've ever considered doing a Twitch build. For those of you who don't know, Twitch is a platform where you can do stuff live and get paid for it. No, I'm not going to do that. I can't imagine anybody would want to pay for that, to watch me do anything. And it would have to be like 0.1 cents per hour because I'm so slow. So at any rate, that's not going to happen. So let's see here. All right, I appreciate the kind words from everybody. Okay, somebody mentions Matt Bowl, actually, my good buddy Matt Bowl, who owns Hobby World USA. You guys know I love him. I was shaking my Tet bottle a lot because it was getting pretty low, still is. And he reminded me to mention that you can extend the brush, okay? And it's pretty easy. This is a technique that Dukes figured out. That little section right there at the end, you can grab it with tweezers and you can pull it. You have to be careful because you pull it all the way out. But you can pull it out about another 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch maybe, and that will make it easier for you to get to the bottom of the bottle. So that is a great tip. Okay, David I says, the lever you struggled to identify is the pump handle for the undercarriage hydraulics fitted to early Mark 1s. So yeah, that was that lever on the right-hand side of the cockpit that I didn't know what it was, but I elected to build the version where I was clipping that off. So there you go. Early Mark 1, if you're that guy, leave it on there. Okay, let's see. Actually, the Spitfire was made at Castle Bromwich from Mark II onward. Sorry about the small nitpick. Never apologize for stuff like that. That's just great information, Jeffrey, and I appreciate it. I didn't know, and so now I've learned something. Also, I know, I got told by a bunch of you British guys that it's actually pronounced Castle Bromwich or Bromwich or whatever. Whatever. I see the letters there. I say them, you know. Anyway. It's like I'm never going to be persuaded to pronounce Junkers that way. I'm always just going to say Junkers. I don't know. I just think Junkers is funnier. Anyhow, okay, let's see. I like the longer videos. I appreciate that. Look, I for the most part, it's like 100 to 1, but I do occasionally get a comment about the length of my videos. And it's kind of, I mean, it kind of just makes me laugh. Because the truth is, you're just wasting your time telling me my videos are too long or that I talk too much or whatever. It is what it is. I go off the cuff. It's unscripted. I say what I feel like I need to say, and it's going to be as long as it's going to be. And if you don't like the length, either go watch something else or learn to use that little pause button. It's the one that looks like 2 vertical little stripes, you know? It's really pretty basic. Anyhow, enough of that. Okay, let's see. Just ordered the Spitfire Mark 24. Have you ever done a video, or could you do one on the future? I think he must be talking about the Airfix kit. No, not likely to happen. Everything I've seen tells me that's not a kit that I really want to bother with. Okay, I have a tendency of adjusting parts before I commit to glue. So in the case of the panel line alignment difference, I would be scraping the flange on the insert until I get the parts to level out. And yeah, that's the normal thing that you want to do. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, though. But yeah, ideally you obviously want to get everything lined up before you commit to glue. And that's a tip from Cesar Munoz, who's a really, really good model maker. He lives in Germany, and he does really good car models. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Yeah, here's one. Castle Brom Witch, LOL. Okay, here's a good one. Do you wash your sprues before you prime paint? Absolutely not. It's a waste of time, and you're just adding the risk of breaking something off and watching it go down the drain. Why is it a waste of time? Because the myth that that people are going off of when they feel like they need to wash their sprues is that they have mold release all over them. Mold release is a substance that's basically used to lubricate the sprues so that they come flying out of the injection mold more easily. And the reality is it's just not a thing, not much anymore anyway. It's bad stuff because in most cases it's like a silicon-based spray, and you don't want anything silicon-based near anything that you're going to be painting. So it's a bad thing. But here's the deal. If it's there, you're going to know it. Your parts are going to be sticky. They may even smell funny. You'll probably be able to see the stuff. And I honestly, in my entire model building career, have never run into it. Where you might run into it is on a kit from, like I hear Zvezda sometimes has it, you know, short run kits from third world countries. I don't know, maybe that's where you'll see some mold release. But there's two reasons why you're not going to see it on modern kits. One is that it's just not necessary because mold designs are better and parts cool more effectively and they come out of the mold more easily. But also because a lot of modern polymer systems have release agents or slip agents mixed in with them at the resin level. And they don't affect the paintability of the part because they kick in at a certain temperature. So they don't need to use any kind of a spray-on mold release. The other reason is that it's just not profitable. Having to spray mold release in a mold every time you shoot a part and clean stuff up is extra labor, and injection molding is a really low margin business. And honestly, most injection molding plants don't want to do anything that takes away from the bottom line. And so they're not going to do something like spray and mold release unless they just absolutely have to. But a third reason that's even more important is that a lot of plants are prohibited from using it because of other customers they have. I mean, look, injection molding plastic model kits is not very high volume at all. You may see, I mean, it would be unusual for a plastic injection molded kit to have 100,000 shots over its entire lifetime. And the average injection molding plant is doing stuff that has 100,000 shots or more per year. In fact, 100,000 shots in the injection molding industry is kind of considered to be, anything below that is kind of considered to be short run or low volume. So if you've got a customer who's you know, asking you to do 1 million shots a year, and because they're in electronics or medical devices, they can't have any mold release because of the contaminants. And if they tell you that it's not going to be allowed, you're probably not going to break that rule for your 5,000 shot per year injection molded plastic model customer. So anyway, that's a lot of an answer for a commonly asked question. Absolutely, you should clean your parts before you paint them, but that's after you've already had your nasty little paws all over them during your assembly work. And so yeah, that's a completely different deal from washing your sprues. Okay, just wanted to ask you about your sprue cutters. Do you have the model number for them? Sorry, I've been getting a lot of questions about these Gundam Planet nippers, and unfortunately, the folks at Gundam Planet seem to be out of them and have been for a long time, so you may not be able to get any from those guys. But there are a number of other brands that have appeared since I bought these. Ming, Dispier. There's one that a lot of people are talking about right now from a company in Japan called Sonoda that are like 20 bucks, and I think I'm going to try and find a pair of those on Amazon just to see if I can check them out. So, sorry, these are the Gundam Planet Fine Point or premium side cutters, which is kind of a weird name for them, but apparently you can't get them right now, and who knows if you'll be able to again. So, okay, option C, in 3200 QV was shot down over Sangat, was recovered in 1986. So that's kind of good to know. That's one of the color schemes in the instructions. What happened to the Model Factory Hero Bruff Superior? Yeah, we're not talking about that. We'll get back to it. Okay, when using the fiberglass brush thing, does it shed any of the fiberglass fibers when using? If one is hypersensitive to fiberglass and like materials, what precautions should one do to avoid using it? Yes, they absolutely do shed. Both types of fiberglass brushes that I mentioned are going to shed, and you need to get them off of your parts because you don't want to find one underneath your paint. You obviously don't want one in your skin or in your eye. So, you know, wear gloves, wear protective glasses, whatever you got to do. Just use common sense, safety, things there. Okay, let's see. Damn, dude, you need to change your shirt after you play with the family pets. Yeah, I had a lot of cat hair on me that day. Okay, so here's some comments about the kit. Nice quality, but so much mistake in the kit. The seat is wrong for Mark 1. These flare racks were not installed in the seat. The armor mounting screws on the backrest, we talked about that. And the crowbar not being in the Mark 1 door. So, yeah, you know, those flares, I don't know. I'm probably going to clip those off because I think that's the consensus, that they were, in fact, not supposed to be included. Okay, let's take a look at episode number 2 and see what kind of questions we've got. Okay, here we go. Here's somebody who asks about optivisors, and I do talk about it all the time, and I never show it. But this is the one that I use. This thing is nasty, it's old, it's beat up, but it really has worked well for me. This one is Bausch & Lomb. It's like 30 bucks. It comes with 3 different lenses. Dear Lord, that thing is filthy. Anyway, I use the strongest lens, and the thing that sucks about it is that you have to be about this far away for it to be in focus, but you get a nice wide field of view. And I actually tried the dental loops, the ones that, you know, have the little like loops on each eye on what looks like a pair of eyeglasses, and I just couldn't get next to them. The field of view was really, really small, and the depth of field was also really, really small. So I've just stuck to these. I put them on my head along with my +1 readers, and that way I can kind of flip back and forth between the two. But I also have a pair of +2 readers that I will use for things where I don't need either of the other two. Okay, here's one from some guy called Super Goof, and yeah, that's appropriate because look, dude, his comment is where I say, you can see the pin mark is going to show up, and he says, no, I can't because I'm looking at your cutting mat or the back of your hand or your knuckles. These have so much great content, but please aim the camera at what you're talking about. Thanks. Okay, he's not wrong. I am constantly obscuring things with my hands or whatever. But seriously, dude, have you ever tried to build on camera? I mean, I only have 2 hands, so I'm working with these 2, and the camera is up there on that mount that it's sitting on right now, and I just kind of have to do the best I can. So, sorry, I'm trying. I'll try to do better, but look, you're going to get to see the back of my hands at least a few times. Okay, just a little tip I picked up somewhere. Do an eBay search for disposable micro brush. These are tiny brushes that are used to apply glue for fake eyelashes. Very cheap, and I use them to apply kicker, glue debonder, and I especially love them for liquid mask. They're even great for paint touch-ups where you don't want to get a brush dirty. Come in different sizes. Also, I shave the bristles off the used brushes and use the pointed plastic handle as a glue or kicker applicator. And he is exactly right. This is a great tip. I'm not sure which size these are, but that's what he's talking about. They're just, like he said, tiny little disposable brushes, and they are great for all of the above mentioned tasks. And you can get them on Amazon, eBay, whatever. Very easy to find. Okay, that about covers episode 2. Let's see what's up on episode 3. We might get through this really quick. Okay, here's a question that came up. Is there a reason why you sand parallel to the seam? And what he was talking about is when I was sanding the joint on the inside of the fuselage right here, I was sanding it, parallel to the seam. And the answer is no. There is no particular reason other than that's just how it was easiest to get to. Truthfully, I try to sand at a 45-degree angle, and I switch 90 degrees with each successive grit. But sometimes you just can't get to it. So, you just have to do what works. So here's a great tip. Talking about the Tamiya photo etch saws. Okay, the ones that I was using to do some panel line rescribing. His comment here is that they're really flimsy, and he's not wrong. They are pretty flimsy. And what he's done, his suggestion here is, this is Andy Smith, he's a good model maker and a member of SMCG, is cut out a piece of photo etch and super glue it to the spine to stiffen it. You could use a piece of brass, you could use whatever, but that really is a pretty good suggestion. And I might do that with some of mine, because this one in particular that I use a lot with the little butter knife shaped blade, it really does wobble all around. So that's a great tip. Thanks, Andy, for that one. Okay, this is the guy who was talking about the undercarriage hydraulic pump lever. He's talking about airbrush needle stick. I use Iwata airbrushes as well. I do pull the needle after every session and wipe it with lacquer thinners. What I do then is put 1 drop of Iwata Super Lube on the needle and draw it to the needle tip between my fingers. Makes it super easy to clean and operate. Okay, now the reason that I wanted to cover this one, I totally agree about pulling the needle after you spray. It's really the right habit to be in. I just suck at remembering to do it. But his point about the Iwata Super Lube, I'm going to disagree with that completely. In fact, I threw mine away recently because I and a lot of people have found that Iwata Super Lube actually can act like needle glue instead of needle lube. Whatever it is that's in it after time can kind of gel, I guess, and end up making your needle stick. So yeah, I don't think it's really a great product, at least not if you're if you've got a lot of time between spray sessions. Now, some people do swear by the Badger Lube, which is called Red Gab, another one of their ridiculous product names. It's Badger spelled backwards, and a lot of people like it. But I personally do not use any lube on my airbrush needles at all. I just don't find the need to, and I haven't found that it prevents needle stick. And here's the thing, especially if you're using lacquers that have a powerful solvent, any lube you put in there is going to get washed out pretty quickly, and it's not going to be helping you. So I personally just don't see the need or the rationale for using airbrush lube at all. Here's a guy who asks again, do you usually clean all plastic parts before assembly? Again, and I will keep saying, I don't mind repeating myself on that one. No. Okay. What is the name of that expensive Japanese file you use? Okay. Good question. This is, the brand name of this file is Suji Burrito. I have no idea what that means. I got it from the guys at Ultimate Modeling Products on their UMP retail site. There's like 6 different ones, and I confess I bought the whole set of 6, and it was like $100. So they're not cheap, but they are fantastic. They are so sharp. These are precision tools made out of high quality steel, and the set of 6 gives you every shape that you could possibly need. So yeah, it was expensive, but you buy really good tools once in your life. So I again, don't regret spending that money. Okay, here's a question. Does it not darken the paint color sprayed over dark primers like black or dark gray, especially when using lighter colors of paint? Yes, probably, especially if you use MRP, which is a relatively translucent compared to some of your normal acrylics like Vallejos or Ammo, AK, those type of paints. And you can kind of control that with how much you reduce it, but I spray MRP right out of the bottle, and it definitely will be affected by whatever's underneath it. I find with MRP that it needs, like, the magic number is like 3 layers to really get full density, 100% opacity, and even then you will see a difference in tonality based on what's underneath. So the question is how do you account for that? And the bottom line is, if your color tone isn't exactly what you need it to be, then you adjust it, either by mixing the paint beforehand to account for that, or by post shading. That's just something that I've gotten used to doing, and I don't really mind doing. And I'm doing so much post shading work anyway, as you'll see when we get to doing the exterior paint on this project, that it just kind of becomes part of the process. So if my paint's a little bit dark on my first base color layers, I don't worry about it at all. Now, then another guy follows on and asks, also curious, why black primer coats? So this comes from a technique called black basing that has been around for a long time, but Matt McDougall at Doogs Models has kind of been the champion of it. And we'll get more into this when I do the exterior colors, but the idea is that you use a black base and then you spray a series of layers with your base colors in a real random modeled fashion to begin to create tonal variety so that you have some lighter and darker patches, because that's the way that paint degrades a lot, and it just gives you a more interesting surface rather than just spraying everything in one monochromatic layer. So that's why black. Black also for me is really good for visibility. I find it to be about the easiest for seeing flaws in my bodywork, or things like parting line witnesses or whatever. So, but there's no hard and fast rule. You can do. Yeah, I mean, black basing is just another form of pre-shading, and you can do that on any color. You can use gray, you can use white, whatever. So there's no hard and fast rule about that. One of the comments on this video, I had mentioned that there was a German word for making things worse when you're trying to make them better. And somebody commented that there's a German word for everything, including the fact that there's a German word for everything. And this guy contributes that the word we were looking for is Verschlimmbesserung. Yeah, that's the word, I guess. And Schadenfreude. Yeah, Schadenfreude just means when you're laughing at other people's pain. And that happens. And then here's this guy. I enjoy your channel on 1.75 speed. On speed 1.0, I'd rather put craft paints in my airbrush without thinner. Yeah, that's clever. Again, you're just wasting your time, because in case you haven't noticed, no matter how clever or snappy you think your commentary about the length of my videos is, they haven't changed. Blob that was there. Oops. Okay, so still trying to find episode 4. Let me dial that up and we'll get to those questions. Okay, here we go, episode 4, where I was doing a lot of body work and there were some really good questions and comments about that. Here's one. I was surprised you didn't talk about UV glue as a filler. Okay, so UV glue, if you're not familiar, the most popular brand is called Bondic, and what UV glue is it's just a clear liquid resin that you harden by shining a UV light on it. And I've stopped using Bondic, not because it doesn't work, but because I found an equivalent that was a lot cheaper. This is from a fishing supply company. They use a lot of it, called River Runs. I got a little kit with some thick, some thin, and a light for 20 bucks. And the light's a lot bigger than the little bitty tiny single LED one you get with Bondic. So it was a way better value. The thin stuff is not quite as thin as like extra thin cyanoacrylate, but pretty thin nonetheless. Now, why did I not use it as a filler? Well, I probably could have, because it will sand and polish. I've actually used it to make lenses for lights, because you can fill it into a recess and then sand and polish it till it's crystal clear, and it's great for that type of thing. But honestly, I didn't even think about using it as a filler in that situation that we were looking at with the inside of the Spitfire's fuselage. But I thought about it, and I think I probably would not have chosen it because it is a liquid, and so what happens is it tends to droop down into a gap. It forms a meniscus that's going to be below the level that you're trying to sand down to, and I'm just not sure that I would really want to mess around with trying to pile up enough of it to get it to where I could sand it, when I can easily do just the same thing with a standard lacquer putty. But it's not a bad suggestion, and I may try it. Now, this other guy has replied that he tried it out and found it too soft. I don't know. Again, I've polished the stuff to really good clarity to make a lens for a light, and I didn't think it was too soft, but it's all good. Okay, so here's a guy who asked a really good question. Mark Thompson, I'm confused by the sealing step. I understood when you mentioned styrene res, since the acrylic protects against reactivation by a lacquer color coat, but why does all-clad 309 form a barrier? If it's also a lacquer, won't it potentially be reactivated by a lacquer color coat? Yes, maybe. But I have not found that to be the case. It's really dense, and I've found that if I build it up like I showed you guys by brushing it on there and then sand it back where everything is flush, that pretty much takes care of it. It's just got something to do with the composition of it. But it's something that bears experimenting with. I don't know that other primers necessarily would do the same job. I kind of discovered that 309 works kind of by accident. So anyway, it's all good. It's a very valid question. And you could have done the very same thing that I did by brushing something like Badger primer on there as well. It's just that I find the Badger primer doesn't sand really as good as it needs to until about 24 hours later. I just don't want to wait. Okay, let's see what else we've got on episode 4. Another seam filler I like to use on an unprimed surface is stretched sprue from the same kit in the seam with tamiya extra thin as a bonding agent. And that is a great point. And we could have done that on the seam that I had because it was definitely wide enough. What he's basically saying is if you're not familiar with the technique, you take a piece of sprue, you hold it over a candle flame until it gets soft enough, you pull it, it stretches, and you can get it down to hair thickness. And then you can take and cut a length of it, stuff it down into the joint, put some extra thin on it, and it basically dissolves. And you essentially end up in the same place that you do by using sprue goo. It's just that sprue goo is already made for you. But one advantage that the technique he's talking about has is that it can be a little bit neater because you're literally filling only the joint because you've got that piece of sprue that's the same width. And so it's a good technique. I've used it myself. Now, here he goes on to say, I also go probably too far with sanding, going up to 12,000 grit. Again, depending on where the seam is. The reason I wanted to talk about that one is because that 12,000 grit thing, that's just horse shit. That came from the guys at Micromesh, which people act like is this magical sanding material. And it's just not. Basically, what Micromesh did that was innovative was they put abrasives on cloth. That's the mesh part. But as far as anybody can tell, they created their own grit system. And I feel like they basically did it so that they could sell more, because when you see that number, 12,000 grit, you think you're getting something that's way more fine than it actually is. But if you dig around on the Micromesh website, you can find in a dark corner of it, they have actually got a conversion chart that shows you, based on micron sizes and cross-referencing with the other grit standards. And if you're not familiar with that, there are grit standards that each country has that basically says, okay, a particle of this many microns is going to represent this particular grit size. So that's where you get 400 grit, 600 grit, 1200 grit. And ideally they would be the same all across the world, but they're not. So you have the European standard is a little bit different than the American standard, is a little bit different than the Chinese one, etc. But they're all relatively close. Then you've got this micromesh thing that's just completely off the... It's like a total mismatch. Like 12,000 grit doesn't even make any sense when you look at the other numbers on the chart. So yeah, that's the only reason that I bring that up. Any really good quality abrasive material, like something from 3M or Abralon, I mean, even the really good quality stuff from your hardware store is going to be fine, as long as it's waterproof so that you can use it wet or dry, as long as it's, you know, like these Infini sanding sticks. One thing that I love about them is that the abrasive grit is really consistent. Like, they seem to have sieved it really well so that there's not the random large boulder stuck in there that makes a gouge in your part when you're trying to get a smooth finish. So look, you don't have to use micromesh, and don't believe that, you know, that stuff about 12,000 grit, because 7,000 grit from 3M is probably even finer and is definitely probably higher quality. Okay, Will, what thinners or solvents do you use to clean your paintbrushes? I am honestly pretty abusive with my paintbrushes. When I am using an acrylic paint, I use just IPA, alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol is what I use to clean my brushes most of the time. If I'm using enamels or oils, I'll use mineral spirits. That does a great job of cleaning enamels and oils out of your paintbrushes. But occasionally, if my brushes get really, really nasty, what I'll do is I'll clean them with lacquer thinner. I know it's cruel and unusual punishment, especially for an expensive sable hair brush like a Winsor & Newton Series 7, but it will get all the paint out. And when you do that, then you use a good brush cleaner. Where is it at? I don't see it here on the shelf, but Masters brush cleaner. It's comes in a little tan-colored container, and I think it's basically saddle soap. But it's great for cleaning brushes. You just put a little bit of water in it, rub your brush around in it, and it kind of conditions the brushes at the same time. So if I do resort to cleaning my good brushes with lacquer thinner, I follow up with Masters to kind of just help keep them soft. But look, brushes in my view are a disposable item. I use them till they look funny, then I relegate them to, stuff like brushing lacquer primer on or whatever, and I get some new brushes. That's just my philosophy. I don't try to keep brushes around for forever. Okay, I've been searching for the best fillers and haven't found one that works great. I never heard of Sprue Goo. Sounds great, and I think this is what I was looking for. So that's good. Sprue Goo is very effective, but I just want to reiterate, as I have many times, there is no single universal filler that's perfect for every single situation you're going to encounter. That's why I showed you guys that sort of little decision tree that I go through when I'm deciding which one I want to use, because each situation has characteristics that are going to govern your choice based on what's most important in that particular situation and what you're trying to accomplish. So here's another follow-up question from Darren Cook. Darren runs the Grumpy Old Modelers group on Facebook and has a YouTube channel. And he asks, what are your thoughts on Mr. Dissolve Putty? Mr. Dissolve Putty is a product made by Guns, and honestly, I don't have thoughts because I've never used it. I don't know. Never had a reason to try it, but maybe I should. Okay. Another question about the files. I suggest using black or white sprue from Tamiya car kits when making sprue goo. That's a great idea because then that removes the need to add any lacquer paint to it to make it more visible. So that's a great tip. Okay, so I think that covers it. I think that's all of the specific questions. I hope for all you guys that asked those questions that you feel like I did an okay job of answering them. And I kind of like doing this. So if I get more questions as we go forward with future episodes, then we'll repeat this and I'll answer them on another video segment. So, and I think that's enough for this one. Okay, so if you've kept watching, as always, I appreciate it, and much love.